Good morning, everyone. I'm Stephanie Hunsinger, AARP New Jersey State Director. Welcome to AARP New Jersey's first ever virtual day at the Capitol. Today is the first of a two-day series. We hope that you will join us again on September 29th. If you have not already, there will be a link in the chat to register for that event. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we cannot go in person to the State House in Trenton, but we are pleased you can join us from the comfort and safety of your home. In this hour-long day at the Capitol, you'll hear from Governor Murphy, as well as Assemblywoman Valerie Vinieri-Huddle, Assemblywoman Angela McKnight, and Senator Linda Greenstein on issues that matter to you, your family, and all New Jerseyans. And you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. A few housekeeping things before we get started. I wanted to share that this call is being recorded. There may be reporters on the call, so it's possible you may be quoted if you choose to share a comment or question. During the Zoom meeting, your microphone will be muted until you're invited to speak. We invite you to have your video on so everyone can see each other. The chat box will be limited to private messages to the host of the Zoom meeting. If you'd like to ask one of your legislators a question, please type it into the chat to our Associate State Director labeled India Questions. If you have a technical question, please type it into the chat to our volunteer labeled Dan Tech Questions. If you're being asked to share your question live, you will be prompted to click Host would like to unmute you. Please click the blue button to unmute yourself. We are gathered here today because your elected representatives need to hear from you. Over the course of our 2 virtual days at the Capitol, we will be calling on our lawmakers to restore New Jersey's property tax relief programs, the senior freeze and homestead benefit programs, protect seniors in nursing homes and other long-term care facilities, support our older workforce, and help utility consumers afford their bills. During the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the most traumatic and devastating impacts has taken place in nursing homes and long-term care facilities throughout the state. Since the beginning of the pandemic, AARP New Jersey has been fighting to protect residents and staff in nursing homes and other long-term care facilities. We immediately called for more transparency and public reporting and have been fighting over the past several months for regular and ongoing testing, adequate staffing and oversight, adequate personal protective equipment, and required virtual visitation for residents. It is a tragedy that more than 7,100 residents and staff have died in New Jersey nursing homes and other long-term care facilities due to COVID-19. This is a tragedy that should never have happened, and one that we must ensure never happens again. I am pleased to share that last week, Governor Murphy enacted a package of long-term care reform bills that address the need for regular, ongoing testing, adequate personal protective equipment, and increased wages for low-paid direct care workers. The legislation establishes a direct care ratio to help ensure payments to long-term care facilities are used for the care of residents. The package also creates a long-term care emergency operations center, as well as a New Jersey task force on long-term care quality and safety, which will develop recommendations to make improvements to long-term care facilities and create more and better options for residents to age in place in their homes and communities. And lastly, the package increases funding for long-term care facilities, 60% of which will increase wages for direct care staff, with the remainder allocated to COVID-19 preparedness and response measures. We applaud the New Jersey legislature and the governor for passing this package. However, more must be done. There are currently 7+ additional long-term care reform bills moving through the legislature. 4 of them are being voted on in our state assembly today. Our elected leaders will be making decisions now, and they need to hear from you. They are voting today on additional measures to protect our loved ones, including safe staffing requirements and required virtual visitation. The coronavirus pandemic has lasted 6 months. For some residents in nursing homes, it has been that long, 6 months, since they have seen the faces of those most dear to them. Social isolation is a serious health condition and can lead to increased risk for dementia, among other conditions. Yet many residents in long-term care continue to suffer without the option of virtual visitation. We are urging the state to require policies that prevent social isolation of residents, including requiring facilities to support virtual visitation. Before you hear from your elected leaders, we have Diane Snyder with us, a New Jersey resident whose mother is in a long-term care facility. Diane will be sharing her personal experience about the severe impact social isolation can have on our loved ones. It is my pleasure to introduce Diane and thank her for being with us today.
Good morning. Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you for the time here to allow me to tell my mother's story. So my mother, her name is Sandra Snyder. She's 85 years old and she has been in assisted living for 1.5 years. Prior to then, she lived independently in her home of 50 years with her husband of just under 60 years. 2 years prior to entering assisted living, my mother's health began to decline. She was hospitalized and then went into a rehabilitation with pulmonary embolisms, and she recovered, but it impacted her health. A year later, my father passed, so her husband of 60 years, in August, and she started to get depressed. Her health started failing a little bit more, and by November, we found my mom in the hospital with congestive heart failure, and she never went home. She was in the hospital and rehab through the month of December, and in January of 2019, she entered assisted living. She entered now wheelchair bound, was not able to get herself through the facility, needed to be transported and pushed down into the dining halls and activities. And she entered at a level 4 out of a level of 5 of care. 5 being their memory care unit. So she definitely needed a lot of help at the time. In fact, when I brought her in, I was initially afraid that they were not going to accept her, even though they had previously said when she's ready, they would. But she was a success story. She was, within 3 months, she had entered with a catheter. The catheter was removed. She was able to scoot herself around in her wheelchair. Within 6 months, she was reduced down to a level 2 of care, which was phenomenal. She joined us on family outings to a family beach vacation. We were able to bring her into her home for visits while we were packing her house up and selling it. She was able to come to my home for the holidays. So again, a great assisted living success story. My role with her was managing her finances, bringing her food and supplies, and because she was primarily wheelchair ridden, needing to restock supplies for her, managing her medications, and constant management and measuring of her water retention by monitoring her ankles and her calves where she tended to swell, and skin cancer that she had on her head. Some of the more simple things that I did to help her just feel good about herself was, attending to personal hygiene things that she may not want to ask an aide to help her with, the trimming facial hair, things like that. Helping her decorate for the holiday seasons, which she loved, so that her assisted living room could really feel like home to her. So, success story to say the least. Then COVID hit. My mom managed pretty well in the beginning. She celebrated her 85th birthday in April in isolation through a second floor window. We celebrated in the parking lot and we saw her hand out the window waving to her children and her grandchildren. As COVID became more and more serious and we entered our peak in New Jersey, they had a few outbreaks in the facility and they went on complete room lockdown. Again, she managed that pretty well. She was a trooper, but as the facility lost staff members, became shorthanded, and as rules changed so much, they could only do so much for her. She did her puzzles in her room, happy to read her book, but as time went on, the isolation really started to get to her. She's a bit hard of hearing. Her hearing aids were not working and we've not been able to get them fixed. So doing Skype, et cetera, that they would have arranged for her did not work well. I would have phone conversations with her through her windows throughout that time. The Because of so much change going on with COVID, the rules in the facility changed quite a bit, and she couldn't keep up with them because her short-term memory was failing. So after a while, she just stayed in her room because she just didn't really know what the rules were and what she could do. Then in late June, early July, thank God, they did allow outdoor socially distanced mask wearing and supervised visits, which we're very grateful for. But they're only 15 minutes, and most of the appointments are during the day, and those, like myself and my siblings that work, are not able to go during the day. So I see her once a week at my socially distanced visit and through phone calls and standing in the parking lot and waving to her through her window. But it's getting cold out, and now over the last 2 months or so, I've begun to really see my mother's health failing. Her mental health, the anxiety, the depression, the lack of social interaction. I notice her eyes are getting the glaze when I do visit with her at times, because she's done. As Stephanie said, imagine if we all still were not able to leave our homes. That's the condition and the situation that they are all in at this point. It's COVID fatigue is definitely set in. Her physical well-being, the first visit that I saw her outside, I noticed her ankles were swollen. She's gained weight from the food that's, the simple fattening foods that they're bringing to the rooms and she's eating, and then through depression, she just continues to eat. Having to be able to monitor her ankles, I can't keep track of whether it's weight gain or if it is water retention and her congestive heart failure. She recently told my sister, because she had been using a rollator for a while pre-COVID, which was great. And she recently told my sister she's not even trying anymore because she has no place to go with it. So that motivation isn't there either. They have no essential caregiver policy. I've inquired about it a number of times. It's a fine line that we have to walk between, at least I believe, between staying on, good relationship with the facility, but also being my mother's advocate and needing to get in there and, like other facilities are allowing, and spending time doing things that she needs to do, and just the mental well-being of being with her family. So I'll end by saying in 2 weeks, I'm actually taking my mother out for 2 days. She'll go back in the evening because she is way overdue for doctor's appointments. And she has to go back to, and understandably so, a 2-week quarantine when she goes back. So in order to minimize her time in quarantine, I'm doing 2 days back to back that I know are going to be exhausting to her, but it will be the best thing in the long run so that she can still get to the minimal activities and bingos that they've started to reconvene in the facility. Definitely looking forward to seeing her on those days, but it will be taxing and tiring, but those are the things that we are unfortunately in the need of doing. So I implore anyone in decision-making positions to, again, consider, what if you could not leave your home? What if you were isolated and were not able to speak or touch or be around your loved ones on a regular basis? It is impacting. I've had to call in therapists as well to come and talk to her now about her depression. So I implore you to please consider this and please pass changes. We've got cold weather coming up and a holiday season that will have significant impact on the mental well-being of our loved ones. So thank you for having me today.
Diane, thank you so much for sharing your personal story. It is heartbreaking to listen to it. Unfortunately, we know there are hundreds of other caregivers like you who are going through a similar experience, which is why we are urging our elected leaders to require long-term care facilities to support virtual visitation. Now it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to AARP New Jersey's State Director of Advocacy, Ev Liebman, who will be moderating the rest of today's virtual day at the Capitol. Ev has spent her career advocating for New Jerseyans. She is a lead advocate fighting for nursing home residents and staff, and recently served on the Governor's Coronavirus Restart and Recovery Advisory Council's Healthcare Committee. Ev has been influential in ensuring long-term care residents and staff are protected. Thanks for moderating today, Ev. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. And Diane, thank you for sharing that story. I too have a mom in a memory unit in a long-term care facility like so many of us. And just so you and everyone who's with us this morning know that your stories matter and that we are fighting for your loved ones to ensure their safety and the quality of their care, regardless of where they live, whether it's a nursing home, an assisted living facility, or at home. And you'll hear more about that in a couple minutes. So again, welcome everyone. For those of you who have joined our Days at the Capitol before, you know that this is a little bit different. So just like COVID-19 has upended so many of our routines and ways of going about life and doing our work, so has it upended the ways that we use to influence policymakers on various pieces of legislation and other actions to help support the 50 plus here in New Jersey and across the country. Normally, we would be in Trenton, perhaps at the State House, perhaps at the War Memorial, but we can't be there today. The State House, in fact, is closed to visitors. And so we are hosting our Day at the Capitol virtually. Instead of having it on one day in person, we're having it 2 days. And we have, as you know, invited many of your elected representatives to attend. The legislature has been very busy, and in fact, as we speak this morning, the entire legislature, all 40 of your state senators, all 80 of your members of the assembly are gathering at the State House for votes on the upcoming state budget, which impacts so much of our lives, whether it be property tax relief, funding for health care, other types of social service programs, is all on the agenda for today. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today, as well as on the 29th. So the timing couldn't be more relevant. But as you heard from Stephanie, things are very dynamic today. Schedule could change during the hour. And in fact, we just learned that Senator Greenstein has been pulled away for a voting session and will not be able to join us this morning. Hopefully we'll get her back for Tuesday. As you've heard, while AARP's core mission is to support the health and financial security of all as we age, but particularly the 50 plus, including New Jersey's 1.3 million AARP members, as a result of this devastating pandemic, we have been focusing so much of our work on the most fragile of our residents and our loved ones, those living in long-term care facilities. And so, Larry, if you could pull up slide 1, we'll talk a little bit about some of the work that we have been doing. Stephanie gave a great summary of legislation that was just signed into law last week, but we know the job isn't done, and we are working to continue the improvements in our long-term care facilities. As you know, over 7,000 residents and staff have died in long-term care facilities. We are unfortunately the highest number of deaths in long-term care facilities in the country. And we know that during the early days of the pandemic, the lack of personal protective equipment, the lack of testing, poor communication from facilities, so many reports of families not even being able to get their phone calls answered, let alone visit either in person or virtually, were available. And as we've heard, there were serious and continue to be serious staffing shortages in long-term care facilities. The pandemic has taken a devastating toll, but it has also highlighted the structural problems and weaknesses within our long-term care system that have existed for many decades. And it is now time, beyond time, to fix those structural weaknesses and ensure that a tragedy like this never happens again. Next slide, Larry. As Stephanie mentioned, we were very proud to be with Governor Murphy last week and Assemblywoman Veneri Huddle, who you'll hear from shortly, to enact 4 landmark pieces of legislation to reform our long-term care facilities, including the establishment of an emergency operations center that will ensure that our facilities have PPE, that they have the testing that they need, that they have the backup staffing plans and the technical assistance they need to get through this pandemic, particularly as we brace ourselves for a second wave, and to enhance and stabilize the workforce. Direct care workers in our long-term care facilities have been some of the most underpaid and low-paid workers in our health system for way too many years. And so legislation last week will enhance the wages for direct care workers, including certified nursing assistants, housekeepers, and food service workers, all who play such critical role in infection prevention and in the safety of nursing homes for our loved ones. Along with that legislation, a first in the nation direct care ratio was established, which means that 90% of revenues that are received by our long-term care facilities, and you may or you may not know that most nursing homes are funded through your taxpayer dollars through Medicaid and Medicare. And under the direct care payment ratio, for the first time in New Jersey and for the first time anywhere, 90% of those revenues are going to have to be directed to the care of residents rather than administrative costs and profits. Today, we're very pleased to be able to announce that there are 3 additional pieces of legislation that will also go a long way in reforming our system. To deal with the persistent understaffing in nursing homes for the first time in New Jersey, there is legislation on the agenda today before both the Assembly and the Senate to establish a minimum direct care staff to resident ratio in nursing home. And as you've heard from Diane, the importance of preventing social isolation in nursing homes during times of public health emergencies, but really any time is of paramount concern. And we are hoping today to see the legislature send to the governor a bill that will implement and oversee an isolation prevention project in long-term care facilities that will enhance communications during public health emergencies between residents, the nursing facility, and their families, and require virtual visitation when in-person visitation is suspended, as it is now, and to provide a one-time lump sum payment to long-term care staff who were on the front lines during the pandemic, and like so many of our frontline healthcare workers, need the type of hazard pay that this legislation would provide. So we're gonna change up a little bit here, and I'm just happy to report, and we wanna get her on for you. We have on the line Assemblywoman Valerie Veneri Huddle, who has been our champion in the state assembly to move these reforms forward on long-term care, but has done so much more. She hails from the 37th district, where she has been representing you who are from that district up in Bergen County, either in the assembly or since 2010 in the Senate so very well. She currently chairs the Assembly Aging and Senior Services Committee and serves on the Human Services and Tourism Gaming, and the Arts Committee. Along with this package of what I think is now 14 bills to reform our long-term care system, Valerie Huddle has been our champion on many issues, including pay equity, paid sick days, family lead insurance, and has been working with AARP to update our age discrimination laws to ensure that all workers, regardless of their age, are protected under our state laws against discrimination. So I know that she's got a very busy day ahead of her. And without further ado, Larry, if we can bring Chairwoman Valerie Huddle to the stage. Or India, can you unmute the chairwoman? Hold on, folks, as we deal with our technical.
Hi, Ev, can you hear me?
I can now, Chairwoman. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for that great introduction, and quite frankly for discussing the package of reform bills. A thank you to AARP, first of all, for just giving me a few minutes to speak this morning. You know, there's never been a moment in our state's history where advocacy on behalf of the aging population is more critical and needed as today. I don't want to go over the statistics again, but we do know over half of New Jersey's COVID-19 related deaths were in long-term care facilities. And obviously we are all aware that COVID-19 disproportionately impacted the aging population. You know, with the consequences reaching so much further than this, we also, as you mentioned, the senior isolation piece is also at an all-time high. And so that's why the work of AARP and advocates like yourself are so critical, because as advocates, you quite frankly are at the front lines of advocating for a safer, more resilient long-term care facilities and policies that certainly promote not only physical health, but emotional well-being and social connection. And so as advocates, you're also fighting for the tax relief to end age discrimination. And so, Eb, you mentioned most of the bill packages, and as chair of the Assembly Committee on Aging and Senior Services, I'm really proud to work with all of you to advance those issues. And I also want to give a shout out to my colleague, Senator Joe Vitale. His office and my office and the Office of Legislative Services in Trenton worked so heroically, I have to say, on drafting these reforms, because I think many of you remember when the Manat report was released. It was released at the end of May, and those recommendations were brought forth to the legislature in June. And the Manat report, as you know, did an independent audit of our state's long-term care system and its response to COVID. And so from the end of June through September, we did get half of the bills signed into law. And Eb, you mentioned most of them. And today, as I go into the State House, as I'm sitting here in the State House, we are voting on two more critical pieces today, the staffing piece and the social isolation piece. I think as we have seen these reforms go through the legislature, this certainly is a critical first step in addressing the shortcomings of our long-term care system. And I'm hoping that these measures will ensure that our system is more resilient for future emergencies, including, you know, a second wave, which everyone is referring to. But I hope that we are, and I know that we will be better prepared. But I also want to talk about the budget that we're voting on today. As many of you know, it's a, we're voting on we're voting today in the legislature. And I'm happy to say that the funding for the senior freeze and homestead rebate tax relief, they were originally cut. And today we're voting on a budget that reinstates funding for these critical programs. And so, during times of crisis, budget cuts were essential to keep our state's finances in order. However, we and with the help and advocacy of your members, it should never be at the expense of our vulnerable population, and that includes our seniors. And I just want to add an additional initiative that I'm passionate about, and that I hope that we continue to get this done as well. I've worked closely with you, AARP, on legislation to outlaw age discrimination, which was referred to earlier as well. And the bill number is A681. I think most of you know it. I will continue to fight for that passage of A681 because, again, discrimination in any form, especially today, in today's times, cannot be tolerated. And certainly it includes age discrimination, which is so often difficult to prove, but, nonetheless impacts so many. So I'm really thanking all of you today for your time. And I really have to run into the State House. My session has probably started at 10:30. So I just want to take a few minutes out to talk to you all, because you have been such a help to me as chair of the Aging and Senior Services Committee. So with that, if there are any questions, maybe one or two, but if not, I'm available, as well as my staff. But Ev, if you want to take it away, I have to really run in to the State House.
Chairwoman Veneri Huddle, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes to be with us this morning. We know how busy you are, so we're going to let you go. If we have questions,
thank you.
I'll get them to you. Again, appreciation and thanks from all of us at AARP for all of the work that you are doing, your career of championing older residents in New Jersey and so many more. I know our folks are so happy to hear about the restoration of the property tax relief programs. And please, of course, let us know how the vote goes today. We will be watching it and have been reaching out to all of the legislature to get these bills that are on the agenda for today over to the governor for his signature. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Evan. It was nice to see you last week, even though we were social distancing,
yes,
wearing our masks. But it was nice to sort of feel somewhat normal. And I hope that we can, meet these challenges and have a better quality of life for all. Sometimes these negative consequences turn into positive. So let's be thankful. And I truly am thankful for all of you. So you all stay well, and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks, Ev.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you. That was, for those who may have just joined us, the Assembly Chairwoman of the Assembly Aging and Senior Services Committee, who has been our champion in the face of COVID-19's devastation in nursing homes and long-term care facilities. 3 bills that we are working on are on the agenda today before the Assembly. And a staffing bill as well that is also up for a Senate vote. We have been working hard to see that they get to the governor's desk for his signature, and with your help, we're hoping they will get there and we'll get them over the finish line soon. I've just want to let everyone know that Senator Greenstein, as I mentioned, was not able to join us today because of a last-minute voting session, but she will be here on Tuesday. So if you haven't registered for our second day at the Capitol on Tuesday, please, you'll see that link in the chat, and we'd love to have you then. So we are still waiting for Assemblywoman Angela McKnight, but while we wait for her to get here, Larry, why don't we go back to our presentations and talk a little bit with everyone about AARP's work to protect 50+ voters during the COVID pandemic and ensure that our voices are heard and that everyone has an opportunity to vote safely and securely. Larry, next slide, please. So, I hope everyone knows, but if you
active
don't,
voters will receive a mail-in ballot.
if folks could,
Deadline to register to vote is October 13th. You can register online. Ballots mailed out by October 5th.
if everyone could mute their phones, that would be terrific. So the election,
You could return to USPS.
oh, sorry. Can everyone hear me now? I hope so. All right. In November 3rd is the date for the upcoming general election. And New Jersey has moved to expand mail-in balloting to help ensure that all voters will be able to cast their ballots safely and securely. All registered active voters will receive a mail-in ballot. The deadline to register to vote, if you are not registered, is October 13th, and you can register online. For those who are registered, all counties must mail out the general elections mail-in ballot by October 5th, just around the corner, although we do know that some counties have started mailing their ballots out already. The deadline to return your ballots is November 3rd. You can return them via the Postal Service. You can drop them in a secure ballot drop box that are located throughout your county, or you can deliver your mail-in ballot in person in a polling place at your municipality's polling place. For those of you who would like to vote in-person locations will also be available, and you will be receiving notice of where your polling locations are located. Larry, I'm just going to take a short break now because I understand that Assemblywoman Angela McKnight is with us, and we would like to get her on before she has to go into that same voting session that Assemblywoman Veneri Huddle is on her way to. So let me introduce, just for a minute or two, Assemblywoman Angela McKnight. Thank you so much, Assemblywoman, for being with us. Assemblywoman McKnight represents the 31st Legislative District covering Hudson County. She was first elected to the Assembly in 2016, where she now serves as chairwoman of the Assembly Homeland Security and State Preparedness Committee and is a member of the Assembly Aging and Senior Services and Women and Children's Committee, so we know where her heart is. She, along with Assemblywoman Veneri Huddle, has been a steadfast champion and sponsor of legislation to reform our system of long-term care, where she is a powerful voice to ensure the dignity, the safety, and the quality of care for our older residents. So Angela McKnight, thank you so much for being with us at our first virtual day at the Capitol. Thank you. Can we unmute Assemblywoman McKnight?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, thank you so much. I am so sorry that we have to rush because we have this voting session, and I was listening to the chairwoman and the advocacy of AARP for many, 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 many years
has been phenomenal. I have a nonprofit that I started called Angela Cares, and we predominantly work with senior citizens. And that was because of the issues that we have that I've seen with the seniors, and working with the AARP chapter in Jersey City, as well as the chapter that's in Montclair. That's been my goal, to ensure that seniors age in place, whether they are home or if they're in a nursing home. And to be on the Aging and Senior Citizen Committee with the chairwoman, I was so happy that the committee was just recently formed. And with this pandemic, it really just exposed what was happening, what was already happening for many, many, many years. And I will continue to do my best to make sure that our seniors age in place with dignity and with the care that they so much deserve. And for the bad actors who are doing terrible things to our seniors, we have to make sure that they are held accountable for, because people put their loved ones inside nursing homes for them to be cared for, not for them to be abused. So I will continue to advocate and support the need to make sure that reform is done. I will work with my chairwoman as well as my fellow colleagues and with the AARP. So if you ever need me, if you ever want to talk with me, if you ever need me to come and speak, I am there, because together we will definitely continue to shed a light on what's happening and to help our seniors age in place. And I look forward to voting for these bills. I am on the isolation one, because we have to remove that. And I look forward to Governor Murphy signing these bills so that we can move a step further to ensure that our loved ones, as well as the people who care for them inside the facilities, that they get what they need and what they deserve. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak a few minutes. I'm right outside the State House, because if I would have gone in, my phone would have died. So I look forward to continuously to work with you. And thank you again, AARP, and all the members for all that you have done, all that you continue to do to make sure that our seniors, including yourself, receive the care that you so much need. So I appreciate you, and thank you again.
Well, thank you so much, Assemblywoman McKnight. We appreciate you, and we thank you for your leadership on all of these issues. Normally, we would take a few questions from our audience, but we know that you are getting out of the car and going into the State House. So we are going to let you go. And if we do have questions, we will forward them on to you and your staff. And we look forward to working with you. And yes, getting these bills over the finish line and getting them signed soon. So thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, and have a good one.
You too. Great. Again, that was Assemblywoman Angela McKnight from Hudson County on her way into the Assembly chambers to begin voting on quite a long agenda of bills that, but some very important ones to you and our 1.3 million members, including the restoration of property tax relief programs, these pieces of legislation that will improve our long-term care facilities. So Larry, I am going to see if we can go back to our voter education presentation so that I want to make sure that all of our folks have that critical information. And then we will go to the governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy. So next slide, please, Larry. So along with knowing how to cast your ballot securely and safely, whether or not it's using a mail-in ballot or going to the polls, AARP is focused on ensuring that candidates address the issues that are important to the 50-plus voter. And that includes securing the economic health of Americans 50-plus, building a strong long-term care system, protecting and strengthening Medicare, lowering prescription drug prices, and strengthening Social Security. Next slide, please, Larry. And to that end, we want to hear what the candidates have to say, particularly the presidential candidates, on these issues that are so important to the 50 plus. And so on October 7th, AARP New Jersey is hosting a virtual debate watch party for the vice presidential debate between Vice President Pence and the Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. And on October 22nd, we are also hosting a debate watch party, the last presidential debate before the election between President Trump and Senator Joe Biden. We are hosting these via Zoom from 8:30 to 10 p.m. We'll do a 30-minute pre-debate briefing, and we will be working with you along with many of our other volunteers to listen to what the candidates have to say, to tweet out and post on social media where they stand on the issues that are important to us. And so if you would like to have us, we would love to have you. And you can register for our debate watch parties through the link that's being posted in the chat. So, Larry, next slide, please. If you would like more information about the upcoming election, including where to vote, how to vote, who the candidates are, you can go to aarp.org/njvotes2020. And if you haven't received it already, please keep an eye out for the AARP bulletin that you're getting this month in your mailboxes, or I should say in October. We're almost there. That will also include information, important phone numbers, and links to information about voting in the upcoming election here in New Jersey. And so, Larry, without further ado, I think it's time in our agenda to hear from New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. Unfortunately, Governor Murphy is not able to join us live for today's event. As you've heard all morning, there's so much going on at the State House, but he has graciously taken the time to prepare a video to share with us and to address you all. Governor Murphy is the 56th governor of New Jersey. Prior to his work in public service, he spent 23 years working for Goldman Sachs. And after retiring, he served as the chair of the New Jersey Benefits Task Force and the National Finance Chair of the Democratic National Committee. He's also served on the board of the NAACP. And in 2009, he was appointed ambassador to Germany by President Obama, where he remained until 2013. AARP has worked closely with the governor and his administration to pass some of the landmark legislation reforming New Jersey's long-term care facilities that we discussed earlier this morning, to enact the state's first paid sick day statewide program, to enhance our program for family leave insurance, a program very important to family caregivers so they don't have to make the difficult choices between caring for a loved one and their jobs, as well as the Secure Choice Retirement Savings Program, which is a public-private initiative to offer a retirement savings program to the more than half of New Jersey's private sector workforce who don't have a way to save for retirement at work. And so without further ado, Larry, can we hear from Governor Murphy?
Good morning, everyone. Governor Phil Murphy here. Although I wish we could be together in person, I am thrilled to see AARP's lobbying day continue despite the challenges of COVID-19. As we continue to face this pandemic, your leadership, strong advocacy, and voices of experience are more important than ever. And not just to the 50+ New Jerseyans, but to everyone in our state. Together, thanks in large part to the work of AARP NJ, we have achieved some incredible things. We protected the Affordable Care Act and made healthcare more affordable for countless residents. We ended surprise medical bills, expanded paid family leave, enacted the nation's strongest equal pay law, raised the minimum wage, and invested in the state pension system. And we enacted secure choice to allow countless New Jerseyans the opportunity to save for their retirements. This has been a key issue for AARP NJ for a long time, and we got it done. These are the kinds of victories that support New Jersey's families and caregivers and ease people's burdens. These are great victories of which I am proud to have been a part of and grateful for your advocacy. And they are why, despite the pain and grief the last 6 months has brought, despite the challenges we still face, I remain optimistic as ever before about our future. Many of you have spent decades, if not your entire lives here. You have worked and raised your families here. You have helped guide our state through difficult times and shaped our values. There is no denying we are facing a tough time ahead, but we are determined to maintain and reflect those values in our state budget. Our proposed budget restores the homestead benefit and senior freeze. It follows through on our commitment to increase the earned income tax credit to 40%, and it proposes increasing earned income tax credit eligibility to assist tens of thousands of more young adults. And it includes startup funding for secure choice. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused real hardship, and our priority is to do all we can to support New Jerseyans and ease the burdens this crisis has caused. Throughout this pandemic, we have protected tenants from the threat of eviction and worked with our utilities to prevent service disruptions and shutoffs. But beyond financial challenges COVID-19 has caused, we have also had to face devastating health consequences. Across the nation, long-term care facilities have been hit hard by COVID-19. And while we take no solace in the fact that we aren't alone, we are determined to be a leader in showing a better way forward. In the late spring, with both the Departments of Health and Human Services, we engaged nationally recognized experts from Manat Health to help us hone in on short, medium, and long-range solutions. Many of these recommendations have already been set in motion, and we have worked with our partners in the state legislature to provide legislative solutions to ensure this vulnerable population is protected. Let me be clear. Our administration is committed to building a stronger and fairer New Jersey for everyone. So, as you continue your advocacy, please be assured that our commitment has not wavered, and neither have New Jersey's values. These values will lead us toward prosperity for everyone, not just in the economic sense, but in health and in quality of life as well. And next year, I look forward to joining you in person. Thank you again so much for everything you do, and God bless each and every one of you.
Well, we certainly thank Governor Murphy for those video remarks, and we certainly share with him our hope that next year our day at the Capitol will indeed be in person in Trenton at the State House. Larry, if we can go back to our slide presentation, to our slides on our affordable utility campaign. I think it's slide 13 in the last few minutes that we have with folks today. I just want to give folks a heads up and information of the work that we're doing to try and protect all New Jerseyans. I always ask this question in person, but raise your hand if you have a utility bill, and I'm sure everyone is raising their hands. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has taken not only a devastating health toll on our state, but it has created an unprecedented fiscal crisis for so many families. Over 1 million unemployed, many working but with reduced hours, and just like folks have been struggling to cover their mortgages, to pay their property taxes, to make the rent, many families are struggling to literally keep their lights on, their water on, their phone on, and internet service. And so we are encouraging the governor and the legislature to place a moratorium on utility shutoffs during the COVID-19 pandemic and for at least 180 days thereafter. We are concerned that several weeks ago, the governor announced that they would be lifting a voluntary moratorium on shutoffs of electric, gas, and water service, and we believe that that is premature. After all, there are still more than 1 million people out of work. There are still a pandemic raging in our state and across the country. And while these services are critical to health and safety at all times, they are certainly critical now in the face of a pandemic. There are 3 bills that have been introduced in the legislature by Assemblyman Scher to establish a moratorium on shutoffs, to suspend rate increases until after the public health emergency has ended, and to require utilities to provide notice of bill payment assistance programs to their customers through their bill inserts and on their websites. And so we will be providing you with information about this legislation in the chat that will direct you to our action page, where we encourage you to take action and urge your legislators and the governor to establish a moratorium on utility shutoffs and suspend rate increases. So we are at the end of our first hour of our virtual lobby day. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming, for being patient with the schedule today, what with so many members, actually every member of the legislature at the State House, and so many legislators, I should let you know, wanted to be here today, but couldn't because of these voting sessions. Again, Larry, if you want to put the final slide of our of today's program, thanks so much. If you can join us and you haven't yet registered for our second day at the Capitol on September 29th, again from 10 to 11 o'clock, please register. We will have legislators with us. We will have news to share about what happened today, about the budget, property tax relief, and the legislation to protect our older residents in long-term care facilities. Again, you can find this link also in the chat. Also in the chat, you will find links to our action pages to take action, to let your representatives hear from you about these important issues, and for more information on voting. So before we sign off today, again, I want to thank all of you for attending this morning. And I want to thank our volunteers, without whom today would not be possible. Michelle Murphy, Larry Finch, Jim Sint, and Dan Zeevy. Thank you so much for hosting this Zoom Day at the Capitol for us. And let me thank our amazing staff who helped put today together, including Crystal McDonald, Usva Rizzi, Maria Guerra, Susan Coda, Rachel Auerbach, and India Hayes Larrier. So again, we hope to see you on the 29th, and thank you for joining us this morning.